You want to come back and do this tomorrow?
Yeah, why not?
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. Thanks for joining us.
Outnumbered starts right now.
We begin with a Fox News alert on new allegations against former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Now, special counsel Robert Mueller's team is accusing Manafort of attempting to get witnesses to lie for him in court. They say they want Manafort behind bars as he awaits his trial. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Town Hall editor and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich. Republican strategist and senior fellow for the Independent Women's Voice, Lisa Booth. Former deputy spokesperson for the State Department, Fox News analyst and host of Benson and Harf on the radio. Marie Harf is here. And in the center seat, haven't seen him since Jerusalem, the former governor of the great state of Arkansas and Fox News contributor Mike Huckabee. Outnumbered. Governor, great to see you.
Delighted to be here. And it was fun in Jerusalem to be there for the embassy move, and it was great seeing you there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And congratulations on the new book.
Thank you.
How awesome is that?
It's exciting. I feel very blessed today. I do. All right, we'll scoot to the news. Federal prosecutors are working under special counsel Robert Mueller and saying Paul Manafort has been contacting multiple witnesses in their case against him in an attempt to convince them to commit perjury. Manafort has been indicted on charges of conspiracy, money laundering, and tax fraud, among other things, to which he has pleaded not guilty. We should note none of these charges is connected to allegations of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Governor, Paul Manafort.
Well, he's in a lot of trouble, and he could lose his freedom if he did, in fact, violate the terms of his parole, not parole, but bail. And then he'd lose a lot of money as well, because you don't get your bail money back if you violate bail. So I'm sure he's not having the best day of his life today. But it's also a way that Bob Mueller can put pressure not only on Manafort, but put pressure on everybody that he's ever talked to and say, if you don't play ball with me, or if you in any way go outside the lines, we're going to come down on you and come down hard.
All right. What do you say about this idea? I just want to double question you for just 1 second, Governor, and get your expertise on this, about this idea that the president could Manafort anybody. Could Manafort.
Manafort. Well, he'd like to do that, too.
I think that works.
No. I'm so sorry about that.
A new verb. I'm going to Manafort you.
Could pardon anyone in his constellation and pardon my Manafort.
Well, I mean, he legally could do that, but the political consequences could be harsh. Ask Gerald Ford. Well, you can't ask him now. He's passed away. But what I'm saying is when Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon right after he took office, I think it was, looking back, the right thing to do. It saved the country from what would have been disaster. But it cost him probably the re-election of the presidency. I think that, and the fact that he ate a tamale with a shuck on it in San Antonio the weekend before the election, honest to God, I really believe that cost him Texas, cost him the White House. But I'm not sure, was it the tamale or was it the pardon? But the two of them together, and he was
I'm going to go with the tamale.
You cannot eat a tamale in San Antonio with a shuck on it and survive.
Or in Arizona, let's be clear. That's not how you do tamales. But let's get back to Katie's
slamming that down real quick.
Paul Manafort has to know every one of his communications is being monitored.
Right.
Everything's being looked at. Well, I mean, this is just so idiotic that he would think, if true, he could get away with this. And apparently Mueller has known a lot of this for months, and they just now put the court filing out. Paul Manafort's in a lot of trouble.
And that's the thing, though, isn't it?
And he reached out first.
I mean, that's the thing. We don't know what Robert Mueller has, and because of that, we don't know when he would deploy it necessarily. And what you're talking about, Marie, is absolutely true. If this was sitting someplace for a while, what else does he have, and when will he use it?
Well, and we don't know. And that's ultimately going to be up to the judge if the assertions that Mueller is making, if they are indeed true or not. But I do think it's important to point out that this still has nothing to do with Russian collusion or the campaign. And it has more to do, seemingly, about Mueller trying to squeeze Manafort and individuals surrounding President Trump. I mean, it was Judge Ellis in this case who said that Mueller's investigation isn't about fraud with Manafort. It's more about trying to prosecute the president and something that will lead to impeachment. And so I think that is important to remember in the backdrop of all of these discussions.
I would also mention, though, however, that I think everyone likes to tie this to the presidency because Manafort worked on the Trump campaign. However, if you look at the long list of charges, which are very serious, I don't think we should take away from the fact that he has been charged with a number of, with a number of
but when
very
you look
serious
at the dates of those charges.
And he was under investigation before the campaign even started. And so I don't think we should take away from the very serious crimes that Paul Manafort is accused of committing just because Mueller is now using this to squeeze the president. I actually think that they're very separate. And when you look at the most recent charges and accusations of witness tampering, that is very serious. And it's Paul Manafort in these text messages through WhatsApp, which is something that you can use to contact people overseas. He is the one who reached out first. So he now doesn't have the ability to say, well, people just texted me and I just happened to text them back. Yeah. He clearly initiated the conversation, which, according to the special counsel, is a violation of his terms.
Let's get to a presidential tweet right now. The Russian witch hunt hoax continues, if we pop that up on the screen, all because Jeff Sessions didn't tell me he was going to recuse himself. I would have quickly picked someone else. So much time and money wasted, so many lives ruined, and Sessions knew better than most that there was no collusion. Democrat Senator Richard Blumenthal with this response.
The president, once again, is in effect obstructing justice by threatening this kind of retaliatory action against the Department of Justice when it is simply doing its duty to uncover the truth and prosecute criminal wrongdoing. This kind of bullying and bellicose threats against his own attorney general is not only unprecedented and unwise, it is verging on obstruction of justice.
All right, so obstruction of justice comes up a lot.
That's
Governor?
nonsense, utter nonsense. Blumenthal needs to stick to what he knows about, and that's his war experiences during Vietnam. Ooh. For him to talk about obstruction of justice when the president is publicly picking out some things about his attorney general. Now, look, I'm not suggesting that it's altogether good that he's hammering Sessions in public, but obstruction of justice would be he goes over to Sessions' house late at night and he says, pal, if you don't get control of this investigation and fire everybody in there, you know, there's going to be a horse's head in your bed in the morning.
Godfather.
That's obstruction.
Reference.
He sort of did that with Comey. He got close with Comey when he said, hey, can you find your way to dropping the investigation? And then when Comey wouldn't, he fired him, which he admitted on TV.
But to be fair, he also
because of the
told
Russia
Comey,
investigation. So his language gets him close to the line. The president's language
To be
does.
fair, Marie, though, he also told Comey that he wanted to get to the bottom if anyone surrounding him did anything nefarious. And you also go back to your former boss, President Obama, who said publicly that Hillary Clinton didn't do anything wrong. She didn't jeopardize national
we're not
security.
talking about Barack
But how is that
Obama.
any
We're talking
different?
about Donald
But I'm
Trump.
saying, how is that any different than what President Trump told Comey?
Because I think it's completely different. And also, I would point out that I did not think there was anything anyone could do to make me feel sorry for Jeff Sessions, and Donald Trump has.
I do find it interesting that now when Jeff Sessions was chosen to be the Attorney General by President Trump, Democrats accused him of being racist. They said he was a former KKK member, that he had bad ill intentions when it came to illegal immigration, and now all of a sudden they're coming to his defense.
Jeff Sessions
was put into a very tough position because of his close ties to the campaign. Anybody in his position who had ties to the campaign, who was chosen as Attorney General, would have recused himself. Now, does that mean the president's wrong about being frustrated about the recusal? Absolutely not. And the president has a choice. He can fire Attorney General Jeff Sessions and hire someone else if he would like to. And Jeff Sessions also has an option to resign.
Well, and we know from our own reporting that when the decision to recuse was being made, it wasn't made in a vacuum of just one person deciding this.
Correct.
I mean, there was consultation with other legal experts and contemporaries. So he didn't just come to this conclusion, I'm going to recuse. And there, if I remember correctly, were some Republicans who looked upon that as probably the responsible thing to do at the time, given the list of things that you just enumerated. Rudy Giuliani, the president's attorney, has said that there is no way that this president could be committing obstruction of justice. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, well, we will definitely keep an eye on it. But moving along now, new questions over the drafting of that Trump Tower memo following Donald Trump's junior's meeting in 2016 with a Russian lawyer and others. Now, Rudy Giuliani saying President Trump's attorneys did not lie when they contradicted prior statements and said the president did, in fact, dictate that memo.
You think maybe somebody could have made a mistake?
Right. That's a lot of mistakes.
Why is it always
A lot of mistakes.
Why is it always that somebody, you think Jay Sekulow lied? Maybe he just got it wrong. Like I got a few things wrong at the beginning of the investigation. But it was a mistake. I swear to God, it was a mistake. The guy made a mistake.
Giuliani was not yet on the Trump legal team when it made what he calls mistakes in a January letter to special counsel Mueller that leaked over the weekend. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders has also denied allegations that President Trump dictated the Trump Tower statement. Yesterday, she was asked by reporters why those comments contradicted the disclosure by the president's lawyers in that letter to Mueller. Here's how she responded.
So this is from a letter from the outside counsel, and I direct you to them to answer that question. Deborah, once again, you're referencing a letter that came directly from outside counsel, and I would refer you to them to answer that question.
How are we supposed to know what to believe? How can we believe what you're saying from the podium if his lawyers are from the podium, if his lawyers are saying it's entirely inaccurate?
Once again, I can't comment on a letter from the president's outside counsel, and I direct you to them.
So, Lisa, although now Sarah Sanders is putting this out to outside counsel, in August last year, she said specifically that the president did not dictate this response. And now his lawyers are saying that he did.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's not a good look for the White House, and it certainly hurts the credibility for the Trump administration in making their case against all of this. It's not a good look. But it still doesn't change the fact that nobody's been able to prove that any sort of crime took place during that meeting or as a result of that meeting. So I don't think it changes the dynamics there. And I also still think it's really sketchy, and I don't really hear many people talking about this, is the fact that the Russian attorney in that meeting had met with Glenn Simpson prior to that Trump Tower meeting. Fusion GPS, thanks, Harris. And after as well. So, that is questionable, highly questionable in my mind as well. So I think bottom line, it doesn't change the dynamics of things, but it does hurt the credibility.
So, Governor Huckabee, I want to ask you a specific question about the inner workings between the White House now and the campaign. This 2016 meeting was a campaign meeting.
Yeah.
The president, according to his attorneys, dictated the response to questions about the meeting on Air Force One in the official capacity as the president. So is maybe mixing those two what has caused the problem here? Instead of saying that was during the campaign, I'm not going to get involved, even though it was my son who was in this meeting?
Well, first of all, I think anybody that's been in the campaign, and I've been in a bunch of them, know that you take a lot of meetings, you listen to a lot of nonsense, a lot of stuff that people come in. When you sit down with them, they might as well be talking about their Martians.
But what about the discrepancy between the two statements?
I think a lot of it is that you have so many moving parts. You have the lawyers, you have campaign people, you have administration people. They don't always talk. In fact, sometimes they absolutely don't talk. For example, the lawyers for the president don't talk to the White House staff for obvious reasons. So there's a real clear line of separation. When people say, well, they lied, they told different stories, they told the stories they know. If you have a wreck out here on 6th Avenue, I guarantee you 6 people will see it differently, and they'll all tell the cop a different version.
So, Marie, is this just a big miscommunication, or was this a way for the president to try and be involved with the response to the 2016 meeting while also not being, completely honest about how that went down?
So part of the problem is that Jay Sekulow is one of the attorneys who drafted the letter where they admitted the president drafted the public statement. He's also one of the people on the record saying the president had nothing to do with it. So Jay Sekulow is the same person. He either knew or didn't know. He either told the truth or didn't. I have sympathy for people that stand at podiums and represent administrations because sometimes they are not given all of the information. I have no idea what Sarah Sanders knew and what she didn't. Truly, I have no idea. But I have less sympathy for Jay Sekulow, who drafted this 20-page piece that admitted that Donald Trump himself dictated it, and he went on TV and said the exact opposite.
This meeting also took place before the WikiLeaks dump as well, so I think you have to think of that context. If this meeting had happened after some of that information had hit, I think there would be a different context.
It's a credibility issue for the White House and for the president's team.
All right, voters heading to the polls today in 8 states for primary day amid new questions over the battle to control Congress. One state in particular now seen as crucial in telling us whether the supposed Democratic blue wave will still be a success or a washout. Details ahead. Plus, growing pushback now after the president cancels a White House visit by the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles amid a reignited dispute over the national anthem. And now the White House
visit to the White House to celebrate their Super Bowl win amid a renewed dispute over national anthem protests. The White House says the Eagles told them last week more than 80 people would attend, and Sarah Sanders issuing this statement just moments ago, quote, Late Friday, citing the fact that many players would not be in attendance, the team contacted the White House again and attempted to reschedule the event. The president, however, had already announced that he would be traveling overseas on the dates the Eagles proposed. The White House, despite sensing a lack of good faith, nonetheless attempted to work with the Eagles over the weekend to change the event format that could accommodate a smaller group of players. Unfortunately, the Eagles offered to send only a tiny handful of representatives, while making clear that the great majority of players would not attend the event, despite planning to be in D.C. today. In other words, the vast majority of the Eagles team decided to abandon their fans, unquote. Former Eagles wide receiver Torrey Smith tweeting, "So many lies, shaking my head. Here are some facts. Not many people were going to go. No one refused to go simply because Trump insists folks stand for the anthem. The president continues to spread the false narrative that players are anti-military." Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney earlier with this statement. "Disinviting them from the White House only proves that our president is not a true patriot, but a fragile egomaniac obsessed with crowd size and afraid of the embarrassment of throwing a party to which no one wants to attend." So I think it's also worth pointing out that none of the Eagles players kneeled last season during the anthem, and a couple of the players, Malcolm Jenkins and Chris Lulm, had been leading advocates trying to bring law enforcement and players and advocacy groups together. So there are players on the Eagles who I actually think have been trying to walk a middle line here and be proactive in addressing these issues and not just reactive. Katie, how do you feel about the White House canceling this? I actually don't like canceling the event.
Look, I think when it comes down to it, if you look at the recent statement that just came out by the White House, it seems like there was a big miscommunication about when this event was going to be taking place. Originally, the team had RSVP'd and the majority of them were going to be there. And then they wanted to change the event to when President Trump was in Singapore. And now with today's date, only 3 or 4 players were going to be able to make it. And when you look at the resources it would take to put on an event like this and to only have 3 or 4 members of the team, that's not a team. Those are individual players who are at the White House. When it comes to the frustration from the president about the national anthem and this new policy that the NFL has to allow players to stay in the locker room, I understand that frustration. I completely agree with him on the idea of them staying in the locker room. But it does seem like in this situation, it's unfortunate that it had to come to this based on the fact that people had this miscommunication.
Well, we haven't yet seen a season where that will have happened, or a preseason. So
we don't know.
So we don't know what players will do in response to the locker room mandate by the NFL. But Governor, I have a question for you. You know, when you get into these situations where there is disagreement about how an event is going to go, having planned so many events, campaign and also as a leader, you know, how does that decision get made? I would imagine it's a situation where you talk about, are there alternatives or that sort of thing?
Well, my guess is that the president just said, hey, if there's only a handful of people, come and cancel it. That's probably what happened. You know, I think the more pleasant thing to do would have been to make sure that you go ahead and have the event. You have 4 or 5 players, and you treat them as if it was an official state visit. You give them such an experience that they go back and tell the others.
Missed out, man.
Wow. That's really interesting.
No, do the unexpected. I always believe in politics. Do the one thing they don't expect you to do. And the one thing nobody expected Donald Trump to do would be to welcome them in, show them the private quarters, give them a bunch of White House swag, hug them, give them the greatest day of their life.
So basically, do what you do when you're on the field. You got to pull an audible.
Yeah.
but Governor, that is really interesting.
Well, but here's the thing. Don't allow this to be dictated by the one group of players who didn't want to be seen with the president.
But I think the president understands for his political base picking this fight as a winning argument. And so I think he was happy with how this turned out, that he got to cancel it and blame them.
So here's the thing. I'm 100% with President Trump on the kneeling issue. I'm interested in hearing from Trump Eagle voters how this goes down in their minds, because people are, you know, as a Redskins fan, if the Redskins had won,
well, we know how you feel,
or even if my Caps, once they win the Stanley Cup, for some reason they were no longer coming or they're disinvited. I mean, I would be upset about that. I mean, I know in political campaigns you don't call when football games are going, NFL football games are going on, because that is the quickest way to alienate and anger a voter. So I'm just interested in here. I'm sure if there's Trump Eagle fans.
Well, I actually asked a Trump voting Eagle fan this morning who I work with. His name is Storm Paglia, and I work with him. And I asked him this morning what his take was. His name is Storm. He's a wonderful person.
What does Storm say?
He said, look, even though they didn't in fact kneel all through the season, if they weren't going to show respect and send a significant portion of the team, they shouldn't have accepted the invite to begin with. I'm with the president on this one. He was so excited when they won the Super Bowl. He's disappointed because he wanted to see Nick Foles there with the trophy. I did too, because Nick Foles is an Arizona Wildcat.
Yes, he is.
There,
my husband reminds me constantly.
Bear down. There's your answer.
We will all be watching at 3 p.m. today.
Ask and deliver.
There you go. Asking you shall receive.
We were talking, and Jared Max, the Fox Sports guy, I thought had a great observation. It may be time to quit having these White House ceremonies. They're not that recent. Reagan started it, and there was sort of a goodwill when he would do it. But frankly, it's become now such a point of tension that sports and music ought to be points of entertainment and escapism from all of these political things. It shouldn't add to the drama.
Well, we will be watching at 3 p.m. today to see how that event goes forward now. And former President Bill Clinton is facing a growing firestorm after saying he does not owe former White House intern Monica Lewinsky a personal apology amid renewed focus on their affair decades ago. Now Clinton appearing to double down on those remarks. Plus, the midterm battle is heating up as voters head to the polls in 8 states today. Why one state is now seen as a likely make or break for Democrats' hopes of taking back Congress. We'll debate.
Breaking news here on Outnumbered. Kate Spade, the accessories and clothing designer, has been found dead inside her Park Avenue apartment in New York City. This was only about 90 minutes or so ago that we have found out about this. Housekeeping staff found her in an apparent suicide. Officials are saying that, and they have given more detail, that there was a note left behind at the scene. They are not divulging exactly what was in that note. The Associated Press says that on a condition of anonymity, they are talking with officials about this. Kate Spade was 55 years old and created that unique line of sleek handbags in the early 1990s. It was an instant hit. She sold her company. It became Kate Spade New York, and currently has more than 140 retail shops and outlet stores across the U.S., 170 of those stores internationally. Hit designer Kate Spade, dead today, age 55. Apparently, she took her life and left a note behind. We'll report more as we learn it.
Fox News alert, it's the Super Tuesday of the primaries. Voters go to the polls in 8 states today, one of them California, could determine the success or failure of that blue wave Democrats are hoping for and make or break the battle for Congress and the control of that House. California's rule that puts the top 2 vote getters on the ballot, regardless of party, could hurt Democrats because the sheer number of candidates may split the vote in too many ways. In the meantime, Republicans could fail to nominate any candidates in races there for Senate and governor. However, there are reports that Republicans are feeling more optimistic about races nationwide as the president seems to have scrapped his loyalty test. He's now backing candidates who did not support him, tweeting out about one of those candidates today, quote, "In high tax, high crime California, be sure to get out and vote for Republican John Cox for governor. He will make a big difference." So, Governor, California is not always in the picture for when we're talking about the control of the power, right? How do you see this playing out today?
Well, I mean, I think this kind of crazy system, it's very similar to what Louisiana does, could work in the Republicans' favor. It's the only way they have a shot in California. The registrations far outnumber the Republicans in that state. But there's some fascinating things going on. For example, the 46% of the people who live in the Bay Area said that they would definitely like to move somewhere else. There's clearly dissatisfaction in the Golden State. And a lot of the reason is it's high taxes, it's unrestricted immigration, it's sanctuary cities, it's everything that the Democrats have basically embraced as their platform. So, it's possible that there could be at least not an uprising, and it's not going to be a revolution, not in California, but there could be enough people who are just sick of the policies that have overrun their state.
Well, the president is emphasizing that again in a tweet this morning. He's been on Twitter all morning talking about California. He said, "Get out the vote in California today for Representative Kevin McCarthy and all of the great GOP candidates for Congress. Keep our country out of the hands of high tax, high crime Nancy Pelosi." So, Lisa, he's going back to Nancy Pelosi as a power play here to get Republicans out to vote.
Yeah, and California is interesting because there's about 3 races that could potentially be blowback on the Democrats, given the state's rules, the 2 top vote getters in the state, the way that the state's rules play out. because there are so many candidates involved. So there's 3 specific states. I think it's Ed Royce, Dana Rohrabacher, and Darrell Issa. Both Ed Royce and Darrell Issa are retiring. But those 3 states that they're specifically concerned about where there could potentially be 2 Republicans running in the general election. And Democrats have specifically stated that the path to the majority in the House runs through the state of California. So if that was to happen, that would be a significant setback for the Democrats in their hopes to take back the House.
I interviewed the California GOP chairman, Brulte, yesterday, and one thing that he pointed out, if that were to happen, if you'd have 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans that would come out of the primaries, is that it causes you to have a tightening of message, something that the Democrats have really struggled with here recently, as you guys are kind of bifurcated in your party right now.
Let's hope Democrats get united in California, because those are 3 very good pickup opportunities. Lisa's right. If we cannot pick up those, it's going to be harder. I don't think impossible, but it will be harder.
All right, we'll move on. Melania Trump and the public eye. The mainstream media's apparent fascination with the First Lady's whereabouts since she had surgery, and whether some in the media have crossed the line. The response coming from the White House. And Bill Clinton doubling down on his handling of the... Now, why do we call it the Monica Lewinsky scandal, by the way? Let's call it the Bill Clinton scandal, at least on Outnumbered. And coming under fire even from some usually friendly quarters of the media. What the former president is saying now, and whether he's just digging himself deeper and deeper in a hole. We'll debate.
Words can't adequately convey just how disturbing a display this was. You must simply just watch it. In an interview with NBC News' Craig Melvin, Clinton told the correspondent he didn't believe he owed Lewinsky a direct apology.
Welcome back. He is not backing down. Former President Bill Clinton is doubling down after he came under fire for his response to questions in an NBC interview where he defended his handling of the Monica Lewinsky scandal, or we're going to call it the Bill Clinton scandal. Clinton said he's apologized enough. You got it, Harris. He says he has no plans to directly ask his former White House intern for her forgiveness. The former president at a book tour event last night. Listen to this.
The truth is, the hubbub was I got hot under the collar because of the way the questions were asked, and I think what was lost are the 2 points that I made that are important to me. The first point is, I did. I meant it then and I meant it now. I apologize to my family, to Monica Lewinsky and her family, and to the American people before a panel of ministers in the White House, which was widely reported. The second is that I support the Me Too movement, and I think it's long overdue. And I have always tried to support it in the decisions and policies that I've advanced.
Well, earlier in the day, Clinton got an earful from his friends on the left and virtually the entire spectrum of the mainstream media.
It has been for decades an unbelievable double standard that the Clintons have used and abused, where nobody is allowed to go there on this issue. He sounded incapable of owning anything.
Why was he so combative in that interview? Why didn't he just say, hey, listen, it's a different time. I feel badly for the way things went down. I feel badly for how Monica Lewinsky was treated. I'm sorry.
Words can't adequately convey just how disturbing a display this was. You must simply just watch it. In an interview with NBC News' Craig Melvin, Clinton told the correspondent he didn't believe he owed Lewinsky a direct apology. That man is frighteningly, pathologically incapable of shame.
Governor, why has it taken so long for Bill Clinton to get tough questions from the media and this sort of response from the media?
When all of this happened back in the 90s, there was not a Me Too movement. Men were getting away with this kind of nonsense. The fact that he got away with it as President of the United States, taking advantage of a 22-year-old kid. And I know you say, well, 22 years is not a kid. It is when you're in the White House, first job out of college. It was an incredibly bad thing that happened to her. I feel of a 22-year-old kid. And I know you say, well, 22 years is not a kid. It is when you're in the White House, first job out of college. It was an incredibly bad thing that happened to her. I feel so sorry for her. I truly do. I feel extraordinarily bad for how her life was ruined by a person who took his power and position and abused her in that way.
Well, and Marie, part of the frustration with the media is that Bill Clinton is trying to pretend like he is a victim. He's talking about the fact that they left $16 million in debt when they left the White House. Is Bill Clinton a victim?
No, and I do not think that was an appropriate answer in any way, shape, or form. As someone who politically supported Bill Clinton and his administration, I watched that interview and it was uncomfortable. It doesn't, like, he's a human being, she's a human being. Answer like a human. Like, how is he so incapable of addressing this like a person? I do not understand why decades later he still cannot come up with a heartfelt, genuine, thoughtful answer publicly, but also probably to his family and to her.
I can tell you why. I mean, there may have not been.
I was going to ask you.
There may have not been a Me Too movement in the 90s, but there was sure a feminist movement. And the feminists didn't take the side of Monica Lewinsky. They took the side of Bill Clinton and the Democratic Party. And Bill Clinton is so incensed when he gets asked about this, as we saw in these interviews, because he has never been held accountable for this before. For decades, the Democratic Party has been embracing him, emboldening him, propping him up as a champion of women's rights. All of this has been in the background. I wrote a book about it a couple of years ago. I have an entire chapter about Bill Clinton and his assault and flattery, about Bill Clinton and his demo creeps, and how this has been justified by the Democratic Party on a strategic and a establishment level for years. And so it's no surprise that he is affronted by this, because he's never had to answer these questions from inside his own party. I'm glad to see that you disagree with him, but this is something that they have enabled and emboldened for years, and that's why he's so surprised.
So this sort of undercurrent, if you will, for Bill Clinton, I'm wondering, Marie, whether this may have clouded things for Hillary Clinton as she tried to play the women card. Remember, she had an actual women card that you could use for donations with her campaign.
Yeah.
There were women who probably generationally were in their age group who remember back when, who were not supportive of this, who felt like Monica Lewinsky was owed an apology as well as her family then. And I want to just say something about an apology. To call her, which he says he's not sorry enough, I guess, to pick up the phone and make it personal. There were other things that he was willing to make personal, but not that. He will publicly apologize, but that's political management.
Right.
That's reputational management.
Yeah.
That's not human contact, as you were pointing out, Marie.
Right, and I agree with that. The answer to your question about Hillary in 2016, I think it could have hurt her if she was running against someone different, but the fact that Donald Trump was accused by over a dozen women of sexual assault or of sexual harassment, the fact that the Access Hollywood
So
tape
why didn't
came out,
women connect with her?
Well, there may be other reasons, but I don't think it's this one.
I think it was a reason,
I think
personally.
another Republican could have used this issue better against Hillary. I think there were a bunch of other reasons, but I actually don't think in 2016 that was one of them.
He brought the accusers of Bill Clinton front and center in the debates. I do think he made this an issue, and I think he was effective in making the issue.
Yeah.
And I do think it had an impact with women voters, because I think they saw Hillary Clinton as the fraud that she is. And what do we find out? The fact that she had allegations come forward in her own campaign and she dismissed them.
Sexual harassment.
So she is the fraud everyone knew she was and is.
Well, we will keep talking about this, I'm sure. Thank you, Lisa. Moving on. First Lady Melania Trump making her first public appearance in almost a month after a kidney procedure. She and the president co-hosting a reception for Gold Star families at the White House last night. The First Lady appearing well in a video taken there, despite the White House saying no press coverage of the event would be allowed. This follows incessant speculation in the mainstream media about Mrs. Trump's whereabouts. One cable network even showing a calendar of her missing days, but a writer for Rolling Stone may have gone beyond the pale, writing, quote, "I wish I didn't suspect that the prolonged, poorly explained public absence of Melania Trump could be about concealing abuse. I wish that it was a ludicrous prospect. I wish that the president wasn't a man with a history of abusing women, including those to whom he is married," unquote. Ahead of the Gold Star reception, the First Lady spokesman Stephanie Grisham clapping back, saying, quote, "Mrs. Trump has always been a strong and independent woman who puts her family and certainly her health above all else, and that won't change over a rabid press corps. She's confident in what she is doing and in her role, and knows the rest is just speculation and nonsense." Meantime, the First Lady staff says that she will be attending a FEMA meeting on hurricane preparedness tomorrow.
You know, we have a high rate of divorce in this nation. And I wonder if people looked inside their own marriages as often as they looked inside other people's marriages, might we be able to tackle that number? This is really nasty. And these people have a child. And he's old enough to read. I mean, this goes to a different place. This feels outside politics, Governor.
It's beyond the pale, and I tell you that what the Rolling Stone article and the CNN calendar did, it shows America why so many people hate, loathe the press. They can't stand them because they see this kind of stuff and they know that never would have been said about.
And your daughter's been on the receiving end of this kind of media coverage.
So I do think, though, and people are probably going to jump on me for saying this, I think this is totally unacceptable and people should not be
Is it outside
speculating
politics?
about